a little more than that. I'm going to leave about 1 inch. Well, I gotta go get a wedge. That thing is sitting straight up and down. Be right back. Alright, so this is actually a video worthy moment. If you were to look at this tree, the lean is favorable. Well, you're going to ask, well, then how come it settled back? Well, because we're down in a hollow. And above us is a fairly stiff breeze. And this is another reason why you want to have enough hinge. You can see, I mean, you might be able to see if it'll focus. That edge right there, you can see where it's beginning to roll. What a shame. That thing was cutting really good until it didn't. I think what it is with that really steep angle on that top plate, I think there's just not enough metal to hold the shape. And that's why it rolled over a little bit. All right, what have we learned so far? That this is a nice running little saw, and it may not have the peak power that my other saws have, but it has enough punch to break the chain loose when it's stuck in the tree, like I was talking about before. There's another sidebar on this. This was a square ground chain that was done for me by a guy who does that, and I was kind of curious, really. And bore cut pretty well, so you know, it's not too aggressive. Did the face gut pretty well. Somewhere around the second tree where I was beginning to cut the top out, even though it looked sharp, it just quit cutting. It just stopped. And when I'm looking at it, I can't show with a camera, that leading edge has rolled over, you know. So while that chain might make, you know, half a tank worth of really fast cuts and nice wood, and that hard stuff out there, especially that beech, it's hard as a freaking rock. It beat over the top plate, that leading edge. It's a shame because it cut really nice right until then. Work saws. Saws have been in and out of my life for a long time, and learned a lot. You know, it's a moving target. That's part of what happens. It's a moving target. So here I am now, many years later, and yeah, I got hooked into the online community. I went pretty heavy into clone saws. Well, that's kind of gone away. There's a reason to have them, and I've kind of boiled out to a couple that work for me. I also went down the modded saw rat hole for a while, and I went down the whole idea of let's make a small saw run like a big saw, and a lot of those things. And then what happens is this, is day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, you start beginning to decide the things that you truly like and are truly valuable. Lightweight saw is a valuable thing. 372s approved that. The 60cc class saw for things like firewood and general farm work prove that as well. But for the work that I'm doing, and this is the key, everybody has a different world. Everybody has a different set of priorities. They don't work for me anymore. That's just simply not enough saw, the 562. Even though it's a snappy little saw, it just simply isn't enough. This saw right here is enough, but I configured it in a way where it became, I guess, inconvenient to where I don't want to run it as much. This saw here, this is a 565. I cut a lot of wood with that saw. It left me every time with a favorable impression of that experience. And it was neither as powerful as either of those two saws, actually. I mean, it's a match of that one, maybe. This one here is just way, way more powerful. But when I was out working, you know, yeah, I could work all day long with that saw. It just didn't beat me, didn't wear me out. One of the best saws I have ever owned for doing the work that I do. But by the same token, one of the most boring saws. So in the online community, using the online metric, one of the least desirable saws you can buy. The throttle response on that one is just quite a bit snappier, just a much more lively saw than this one. This one kind of picks up the RPMs a little bit slow, stuff like that as compared. I mean, it's fast enough, don't get me wrong. It's just as compared to the tweaked 572, it makes nowhere near the power, doesn't have the throttle response. Just a lot of things that the 572 does better, which in a lot of people's minds would make the 572 Hilltop Saw Shop Special with increased compression, some mild porting, muffler mod, stuff like that, a much better saw. But I found myself gravitating to that saw for a variety of different reasons. Same here. The blue saw, oh my God, look at the strikes against it. It's a Chinese clone. It's not OEM. It's heavy. You know, it's got some inconveniences like the external clutch internal sprocket. Oh, did I say it's a clone? But I find myself gravitating to that saw even more than this one. And that's a surprise to me, and way more than this one. Because basically, that blue saw has the same kind of characteristics this saw has, just more. And the other thing the blue saw brings to the table is really what I want to get into next, is a power delivery that works for me. And even though it's heavy, makes my life a little bit easier. Therefore, I can work for a longer period of time doing what I'm going to be doing today. That saw right there is a better felling saw for me than my Hot Rod 572, and it pains me to say that for so many reasons. This one here, you know, I can tell you that until I'm blue in the face. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go and find YouTube videos where it gets stomped all over with cookie cuts, and you know, the guys will say, hey, you know, that thing's a pig, a dog, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, when you live with these things, and there's a difference. When you live with these things, not for a week or a month, but I'm talking for years. And we're going into a couple of years of these saws. That's when you start actually having an opinion that matters, in my humble opinion. And which is another point I want to get into. But anyway, having said that, that blue saw has turned out to be a very, very, very useful tool for me. And I've changed it around for this next round of cutting by putting on a lighter bar, just trying to mitigate the weight situation. And I got rid of the full wrap because, especially with the veneer trees, I really need to get right to the ground, right to the root flares, you know. And I couldn't get there with a full wrap. When that root flare goes down like that, you know, I have to make it to where that handle doesn't interfere with the root flare when I make my bore cuts. Sometimes that can be as high as a foot off the ground. You can go back and look at the videos to see where that is. But what happens is, because you get nervous about having that interference, you cut even higher. I mean, I could possibly have, on a couple of those last trees, taken a few more inches. But because I was nervous about having that handle actually interfere, I'd give myself unconsciously a little bit more space, and I started losing 3 and 4, sometimes 8 to 10 inches of that log, just simply because I didn't want to get into a situation where I'm partly through a cut and bam, that thing hits a root flare and I can't cut anymore. So I got rid of the full wrap on the blue saw and took a little bit of weight off, not much, a little bit. And I'm hoping that will help. I know it will. It's not hoping. I know it will. As a sidebar, I bought a highway handle because I had gotten good results with a highway on the clone 660s. That one there is a piece of crap. I'm able to bend that with my bare hands. So whatever they've done, maybe they relabeled somebody else's bar. That's really no better than the one that came on it. So I have ordered a true OEM half wrap for this saw in order to really make it up to spec for me for felon. But anyway, both those two saws are better than all these saws for the felling I'm doing out here. And it's one of those action speaks louder than words, is when I kind of wake up and roll around and start planning my day and start putting on the not for video, but for work, putting on the trailer or the truck, the saws that I want to run that day. I have a closet full of saws. You know what I'm saying? And those two saws end up there pretty much consistently now. The 585 is a new addition to that. It was 572. I got frustrated enough where I had to put it on the bench. And this guy here, I purposely put it down so that I could explore a couple of the other saws. Yet here it is, and it's going to come back to work, I think. And this guy here is going to be put into a backup role, and it'll be the saw I use for get-togethers and social events and stuff like that. So what is it about these two saws that have moved them to that side of the tailgate, which is the one that I prefer to take into the woods, even over the 565? They're both heavy, right? And that one doesn't even have a modification. It's stock. I can tell you a 592 is probably even better yet. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. This one here has a power delivery pretty much the same as a 592, just about 8% less, 10% less. It's based on displacement. And my guess is if you were to run those back to back, they'd have a similar feel. It's just the 592 has more. Now, I don't particularly care, but I know that a 592 would be an improvement, possibly. If one shows up on the tailgate this coming year, then you'll know that I sprung the money for it, and again, voting with my money. But what will probably happen, kind of back to the mod concept, is I'm probably going to take this saw here or buy another one just like it, put a 592 top end on it to split the difference. I'll probably get close to the same power as a 592, but not having the auto tune, I might lose a little bit. And then I'll have the same power curve, just more of it. Who knows, maybe it'll match this one. So anyway, getting off into the weeds, what is it about those two saws? And even that one. Well, what I can tell you is this reminds me of the discussion about dirt bikes years back. And most people would want to look at a dyno chart to decide which is the faster motorcycle. And none of them would pay attention to how that power was delivered and how easy it was to get the power to the ground. Power delivery. Not just about power band. That's where the power is delivered in the RPM range with a motor. But how it's delivered. And the way that the engine accelerates and deaccelerates, all that stuff, you can't even measure that on a dyno. Throttle response, stuff like that. And the quick ways of trying to do a measurement turned into a verification versus a prediction on the motorcycles. You know, you could have a motorcycle that had, say, theoretically, arbitrarily 4 less horsepower than the peak horsepower of the other brand, but still beat it in a drag race because the way the power was delivered allowed the motorcycle to get traction and get down a loose starting area faster than one that was snappier, light flywheel, and would just bust a tire loose. Well, that same concept holds true with chainsaws. And that's kind of something I've known for years but really haven't been able to articulate. So the big difference between these saws, yeah, the weight's different. The ergonomics are definitely different. You know, the full wrap, bucking spikes, where the clutch is, handlebar, stuff like that, that all matters. But the deciding factors for me on these two saws come into two very simple categories. How easy it is to operate and power delivery. Those two things. Now, the ease to operate include things like the full wrap versus the half wrap. Although I had a full wrap on this for a while and I still preferred it. This one here, when I started running it last week, it was like, this is such a breath of fresh air that immediately I started cutting lower and better. The ability to start, restart in just the day-to-day operation of the saw. And all these are good. They're all good, right? And but with the half wrap, those are better. That's really what it boils down to. And one of the advantages this saw has over this one, and this one is in inclement weather or mud, there's less chance of introducing debris into the muffler, which can get back into the cylinder. Another little deciding factor. One of the reasons why I never did modify this one, because I was running in the snow that year and in the mud, and a couple of my little toy saws actually did get dumped off a bucket or rolled into the mud, and I actually did have a whole bunch of time spent trying to keep them from destroying themselves, you know. So power delivery, that's the big one right there. And I think the only way that I can give you something on video that will mean anything to you is when I'm doing that first face cut, and how many times does it stall the chain out with a 28-inch bar. Less is better. And this guy here could just about do it without stalling, but I still had to finesse it. And when I'm younger and I'm fresh, that's not a big problem. I can rip right through it, and I kind of have that feel, that touch. That's what a good sawyer can do. This one here, believe it or not, stalled less than this one, even though it has less power. And it has to do with the power delivery, that intangible. This guy here, instead of just trying to finesse it, I started leveraging it. So, because it had so much more power, I couldn't push on this one, but I could push on that one. And then I started stalling it again because I was getting kind of power crazed and enjoying that power. But the point was that running it in a normal way, normal amounts of pressure, that thing would never stall. Same with the 585. And so that's one part of it. And the other one, which really stands out to me, is the way I do my cutting is I do a lot of bore cutting. And oftentimes on the very large trees is I'll actually have to get a look around to see what's going on. Of course, you do that anyway. Keep that head spinning, looking up, looking around, making sure that you're not going to get cold cocked by a branch or a widowmaker or something like that. So I have that complete bar stuck in the tree, and get up, walk around, come back, and get back on the saw, pull the trigger, and that chain just starts cutting. There's no bog, there's no nothing. Where on the 562, oftentimes I actually have to pull the saw out to get the chain going, to push it back in. And sometimes what would happen then was on the way out, it would pick up a whole bunch of chips and jam the chain. Now I got a whole new set of problems. You may have seen that a couple times, even with this saw right here. This was infinitely better than the 562 because I've increased the compression on this. It's got really good torque for a 70cc saw. But even with this saw, I got to think about it. These two saws, I don't even have to think about it. It takes that whole thought process away. Not that I can be sloppy, but I don't have to be quite as critical about how I plan, where I plan to end the cut, where I plan to be when I leave that saw on the tree. Do I pull it out some? Stuff like that. Just little things like that take pressure off of me when I'm working, which means over a period of time, I don't tire quite as fast. And that's what it's about. It's about getting through the day, safely, having time and not having pressure. You watch guys sometimes felling trees and you see them rushing around. And a lot of times it's because they're anxious about something. Something's got them insecure, whether it's their own skill set, the saw, where the tree is, stuff like that. Anything that you can do in the felling operation that can take stress off of you, where you can have a more open mind and a more complete view of the work area around you and the tree you're working on, the better. And that's where I'm getting to, is saws like these, it takes some of that stress out of there. I'm not worried about having the bar jam up as much. I have enough power, I can even cut out of some of those situations. So it takes a little stress away. Having a long enough bar where I can make one cut all the way through, that takes a little stress away. I don't have to worry about getting up and matching cuts. And this stuff adds up over a period of time to where some saw experiences, they may start out being really cool, really snappy and fun. But after the day progresses, the week progresses, and you're into month number 2 and year number 2, you start going, damn, I have to work around that shit. And that's the difference right there, is these 2 saws, these 3 saws, but these 2 in particular, in the 585 being the best of the lot, have a power delivery that let me do the work I do the way I want to do it, and I don't have to think about it and finesse as much. It just has power everywhere, enough power to where I don't have to think about so much to cut as I do about actually getting the tree down. The cut's sort of an afterthought. So it takes a lot of stress away. And I don't really know how to quantify that. And the next thing is starts and restarts. That's another one where sometimes you'll actually modify how you work because you're so afraid the thing's going to stall and it's a pain in the ass to start, or too much compression, which is one of the reasons why that saw goes away. Because when I'm tired, sometimes it's hard to get that thing to go. I just don't get the RPMs out of it. Where these guys right here, a little mellower power bands, a little bit, the timing, well, that's got a little advance in the timing, these don't. So that restart thing in the middle of a job is just yet another thing I don't have to work. I don't mind shutting it right off because I know it's going to restart, And when I'm trying to save fuel usage, by the way, is yet another. That's why the 585 is beating this one, but why this one is really back in the mix is it's got that combination of ergos, enough power, but also the fuel usage on that is probably the best of the saws on this tailgate right here. But the point being is all those little things add up. They all add up. And there's no way in freaking hell that a scale, a dynamometer, or a cookie cut race is going to define that stuff. You're not going to get that until you've spent enough time with the saws to figure out what are the little quirks and characteristics of a given saw that either make your life easier or over a period of time wear on you. And again, to try to quantify that, this wears on me to the point where I actually start changing the saws. But up front, it's really cool. But over time, it wears on you. It makes you modify how you work and actually costs you money in this type of work. External clutch, that wears on you. That's why the 585 or a saw like that will win over a saw like this. Noise. One of the reasons why these 2 never got a muffler mod. I'm very capable of doing muffler mods. But after a while, man, my ears hurt. I don't want to run that saw. This one here, man, it barks. Freaking loud. And that's one of those vibrations. It's those things that over time either make your life easier or they compile and make your life a little tougher when you're working. Not just day in, not just the afternoon, not just for 4 cookie cut races, but for a month, a year, 2 years. That begin to bubble up certain saws to where I prefer them versus ones I prefer to look at and brag about once in a while but not use. So right now, all my modded saws, forget about them. They just simply don't fit. And I love them. They're fun. I've got some tweaked John threads and 48 millimeter builds, but the things like the open filters and the muffler mods and the noise and stuff like that, they're just simply disqualified before I even get to it for a work saw. And then you've seen me build 372s. I'm in the process of building a 390 because I think that's a competitor to these for the work I do. Basically stock, but the larger displacement saws where I can kind of cut in a more relaxed way, these bigger trees, they're the ones that boil to the top. Enough power. Obviously, too much weight's a problem. The weight of this saw is lighter than this one, which is one of the reasons why it sits up here. Not the OEM clone thing, but just simply based on performance. It has similar type power, but it weighs less. This one's got so much more power than the other ones. That's why it leapfrogs the 565. So power does matter, but power delivery matters more. And you're not going to get that with a cookie cut race. You're going to get that with a saw stuck in the tree. Or one of the things you'll see me do when I start testing saws is I'll lay the bar on the tree with an aggressive chain, and does it just start cutting? Or do I have to pick it up, rev it up, then put it into the tree? Stuff like that. That adds up. So this conversation, this metric that I'm talking about really isn't for the guys who are part-time cutters, who are going to these big events, who may or may not be a logger in real life, but often are saw enthusiasts. And the definition of win is who's got the snappiest, fastest race saw. This is for the guys who are like me, a farmer, maybe a tree business, do an awful lot of cutting over a long period of time, and are trying to figure out how to pick a saw that will be with them for years, not worried about whether or not they lose a race, because that doesn't freaking matter. But when they come out like I'm doing today, and I got to go down and take some trees down because I need to earn the money, they're going to start, they're going to perform, and at the end of the day, I'm going to look back and say that was a good experience, and there was nothing during that day, or there's a few things during that day about the saw that diminished from that experience, be it power, vibration, noise, mechanical failure, of any of those things which take your mind off the work at hand and then back to the saw. So there's my monologue, a full half hour of it. Let me go start dropping some trees.